Welcome everybody to the Safeguard League Network meeting for May 2023. If you wouldn't mind just putting your details in the chat, just so that we can keep and maintain a log of who's actually here today. As it is 9:30, we'll get cracking straight away, I think. So just be aware of your environmental noise. If you can please mute your camera, your microphones, I would be very grateful. Also, this session is being recorded, so please switch off your camera. We will remove everybody's face from the screen, don't worry, but it just makes it a lot easier in terms of the editing later on if people don't have the cameras on anyway. And if you do have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat constantly just to see if there's anything that we can address. And if we haven't addressed it during our presentation, you can always look towards the end of the presentation for that. All of our DSL network meetings are recorded, like I said, and are available from our Learning for Professionals page once they've been uploaded. And also the videos are also available from our YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/ and then the @ NYSCP. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because that just means that it's more visible to other people who might want to access us. In terms of today, we've got a few things going. So I'll be doing the introduction and the NYSCP update. We've got Kat Morrison, who's our MACE lead and policy officer, who's going to be talking about MACE and contextual safeguarding. Helen is going to talk to you about oral hygiene, food safety and choking. We've got Kaylee Osborne here for low-level concerns, and then Julie Bunn from the head of virtual school will be talking to us about attendance after that. So I've got the microphone on. If you could please just mute your microphone, if that's okay. Thank you. All right, so we'll go into the NYSCP update first off. So one of the things that we really want to make you aware of is the fact that as of the 1st of April, North Yorkshire County Council ceased to be, and we became North Yorkshire Council because we have merged with the district councils. So as a result of this, the old 01609 780 780 number has been finalised, and that will now be getting phased out. And we have a new number if you've got any safeguarding concerns or you need to talk to somebody about early help, etc., which is 0300 131 2131. You will see on our website we still have the old 780 780 number, but there is a box underneath everywhere where it appears here from the 1st of April. This is changing. We will be updating our website in due course so that it only has the 0300 number. The 01609 number will continue for a little while, but we do want to phase it out as soon as we can. So if you can please ensure that you have removed that from all of your literature, things like if you're using the standardized template for the school safeguarding policy and things like that, if you can make sure you update that number to reflect those changes in that document, that would be great. Obviously, in terms of the emergency duty team, that team also is on the 0300 1312 131, so you'll still be able to contact them there. Other numbers are not changing. So if, for example, you're using a professional consultation line, then you can still access that on 01609 535 070. There is no change at all to that. In terms of updates for procedures, practice guidance and 1-minute guides, one of the documents that a lot of partners find very useful, which is the NYSCP standards and criteria, that document has been updated to reflect the the developments as that we are doing them in terms of the signs of safety and everything else. So that's now been updated. Just want to draw your attention because all of you as schools are really frontline in terms of the whole issue in terms of private fostering. It does remain an issue within the county that it's an underreported issue, and that if as a teacher you become aware that a child is being private fostered, i.e. being looked after for a period of 28 days or more by somebody who is not a direct relative, then you must report that to the local authority. You are duty bound to do that, so please be aware of that. For more details on that, that is in the standards and criteria, what you should do, what other people should do, but also there is a 1-minute guide which you can circulate amongst your schools just to raise the awareness of that. There's a new missing from home and care protocol on our website as well, and new safeguarding unborn babies pre-birth guidance, which is probably not as crucial for you all in terms of schools. And safer sleeper guide for professionals that might be useful for any school that has an early years provision within the school, just to be able to advise or get advice for giving advice to parents and that sort of thing. Child abuse linked to faith or belief, including witchcraft. This guidance has been recently created because of there's been some issues that were highlighted through an Ofsted inspection, actually of a nursery rather than of a school, but nevertheless it's still appropriate guidance for everybody as well. And the multi-agency child exploitation guidance has also been updated. I'm sure Kat will be talking about that in her part of the presentation. So someone's got the microphone on. If you could just make sure that your mic's on mute, that'd be grateful. Thank you. For social media, the NYSCP's YouTube channel has been developed and branded. Before, you might remember, we had a web address that started UCU and then a load of other characters. It was very difficult for people to actually remember where that was. We have now managed to get that channel to have a recognizable name. So if you want to access any of our masterclasses, any videos that we've put out, or the DSL networks, then go to youtube.com/@NYSCP. There is a new logo to go with that because of the requirements in terms of social media logos, which are normally circular. So the logo on the right, you will see that is our official logo for any branding in terms of our online social media. But the normal logo that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, that will remain for all other documents. So those are our two versions of the logo that you can see and be assured that it's actually coming from us. So please do check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to it. There is, very helpfully, we have done playlists of things for people. So if, for example, you want to look at masterclasses, there is one for learning. If you're just a professional and looking for anything, there's also stuff for parents, and there's stuff for children and young people on there as well. And we'll continue to develop that as a resource as we go along. We have our podcast as well. That address has moved. We were on Anchor, which was part of Spotify, but as of April, they've rebranded the Anchor area. So now you can actually get us on Spotify. You can also get us on various different other browsers as well for a podcast, but the one thing that we're not on is iTunes at the moment, but we are planning on addressing that as well. The last podcast that we did was a very useful one in terms of just raising awareness of managing allegations against staff, and also for adult related issues in terms of PIPOC procedures, which is people in position of trust. So just worth you having a look at our YouTube, our podcast, because there is a lot of information on there, and various different other podcasts regarding other issues, and we will be doing more on that as well. In terms of the school safeguarding audit, I'm quite sure that you will all be wanting to know what is going on with that now. So the responses to the school safeguarding audit are being reviewed presently, and schools are being selected for panels, and we will be contacting those schools selected in due course. Following the panels, the results of the audit and their key themes will be reported to the NYSCP Learning Improvement Subgroup, and then we'll cascade the results of the whole audit to all schools as well. Obviously, what we'll do is any recommendations that come out of that audit will then feed into the business planning for the NYSCP, so that we can identify how we can help schools to further develop those areas which maybe requires, you know, that they need a little bit more help with. And also the other thing I wanted to raise to your attention is the fact that the school safeguarding conference for 2023, following the very successful audit as a conference that we had in October of 2022, we are looking to hold another conference, probably a similar sort of style to the last one, with some really good keynote speakers. And what we wanted to do was we wanted your feedback in terms of what subjects would you like to be covered in the conference. So, you know, we've got a couple of weeks to gather this sort of information, but if you have any ideas, then if you could please enter them in the chat, or just email me directly at hayden.reesjones@northyorks.gov.uk, and then we'll take that to our conference planning group, and then we'll identify which ones we're going to take forward. One thing I'm pretty sure of is that obviously contextual safeguarding will be in there, and also online safety will be two of the themes that we will definitely be pushing in there. We are looking at maybe doing something different on the lunchtime. One of the feedbacks from everybody was that the lunch was too long. However, when there is over 200 people to feed, you do have to allot a certain amount of time for everybody to be able to eat. If we'd have made it 30 minutes, people would have complained about the fact that they couldn't get food because there wasn't enough time. So what we're looking at doing, as well as a marketplace, is potentially holding some sort of like drop-in workshops and things like that, that you can also attend during the lunch if you've managed to get your lunch, and then you know, you're looking for something to do because you've been around the market. If you don't want to do your networking with other schools, then there'll be other sort of like activities that will be going on during the lunch for you to do as well. So we want to keep it a really lively and informative event. And thank you to everybody who has actually provided that, who attended that conference, because it was really a very much buzzing event. The other thing I just wanted to mention, I forgot to mention about the school audit, is thank you everybody for completing the audits that you have. We do know that it's quite an onerous task, but hopefully you get something out of it as well, and we'll take that forward as well. But if you do have any suggestions in terms of what it is that you would like to see in terms of the next conference, what issues you would like to be covered, then please do let me know, either by email or in the chat now. Thanks very much for that. Upcoming masterclasses. As you know, we always run a monthly masterclass. The only month that we don't run a masterclass is August, because schools are closed. We've listened to your feedback about our previous masterclasses, and one of the concerns that a lot of schools have said was the fact that because it was on a Friday and at the end of the month, it always coincided with school holidays. So every other month you missed one because the school was closed. So what we've done is we have moved the timetable for the masterclasses, and now they will be on the first Wednesday of every month. The only time that's been different has been in January and April, because that was either too close to people coming back from the new year and the holidays there, or because of Easter. So what we did was move it on to the first available Wednesday after that. So there's been, you know, we've done quite a lot of change to try and help you guys to be able to attend the masterclasses, and we've got some really good ones coming up for you. We've got the safeguarding update from the NYSCP business unit. There's also making a good referral in July. We've got in September social, emotional and mental health. In October, we've got some really good presentation in relation to reducing parental conflict, and then obviously in November, Kat will be delivering our multi-agency child exploitation update as well. So all of that will be available. It's all available for you to be able to book now on NYES, and to get the links to those individual courses, please just go to our training page on our website and you'll be able to do that. Obviously, because they're masterclasses, we do record all of those sessions, and they are available on our website. The other issue as well is if you do complete the if you do attend the masterclass, then please do go back onto NYES and book your feedback, and then you will get a certificate for attending that, which will help out with your CPD as well. I didn't think that the 1st of November was half term. I thought it was the week before. I think there's just been a chat that's in the question in the chat. I'll double check that though, if that's the case. Okay, I will now hand you over to Kat to talk about the MACE and contextual safeguarding. Over to you, Kat.
Hayden, just before I jump on, we've got somebody sat in the lobby that we can't admit. So I don't know if you want to have a look and just follow that up while I'm chatting away, if that's possible, please. I'm just going to leave my camera on to just say hello and introduce myself, and then I'll turn my camera off just to help Hayden with the recording. But my name is Kat Morrison, and I'm the Policy and Development Officer for North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and I cover the multi-agency child exploitation and contextual safeguarding arrangements. So right, camera's going off. Okay, so I think I had the pleasure of meeting most of you face to face at our October DSL conference, which was wonderful sessions covering MACE. Today I'm going to be kind of refreshing some of those slides because I'm aware that there were obviously people here today who weren't with us in October. But I'm also going to have a little bit of time talking about any presenting and emerging themes that we've got in North Yorkshire in relation to MACE, and we're going to have a little bit of a focus on disruption as well. Little bit of participation from you guys, so get ready on the chat bar if possible. Yeah, we'll make a start. Okay, can you move on to the next slide, please, Hayden? Thank you. Right, so we start as always by talking about kind of the concept of contextual safeguarding. And it's that approach to safeguarding first coined by Dr. Carleen Furman that responds to young people's experiences of harm outside the home and that familial network. So, for example, with peers in the school environment and in those neighbourhoods and communities. And it explores the places and spaces where young people spend their time and the harms that they may be exposed to within these spaces. So looking at that diagram in the bottom left, you can see those concentric circles around a young person, and that familial circle of the family and the home environment, and then that extra familial circles of kind of the peer group, the schools and the neighbourhood. But there's something missing that kind of overlaps all of those concentric circles.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Can we just double check everyone's on mute, please? Thank you. So yeah, those concentric circles, there is this place and space that young people are spending a lot of their time, which kind of overlaps all those circles. So I'm going to check who's fastest finger on the chat bar there, if someone can add into the chat bar for me, that space where young people are spending a lot of time at the minute. Excellent. Rebecca, you get the gold star today for being the quickest off the mark. Yeah, so that it's the online space. Lovely, they're all coming in now. And the reason it doesn't have its own kind of concentric circle around that young person is because it overlaps and intertwines all those places and spaces seamlessly. Often as adults and professionals, we see that kind of online space as a separate entity. And for young people, it's not. It's just part of their life. It's part of the physical places and spaces they spend their time in as well. And we're going to be looking a little bit more about kind of the themes in relation to online exploitation a little bit later on. Hayden, can you move on to the next one for me, please? Thank you. So just to kind of put a little bit of kind of context in relation to exploitation in North Yorkshire, I'm just going to throw a little bit of a caveat in here that obviously we're exploring some sensitive data, so I would ask that this slide isn't necessarily shared any wider than this meeting, but I think it's really important to give you a little bit of a picture of where we are at the minute. So I've pulled some data off in relation to, we're probably a couple of weeks old now, from the back end of April. And at that time, we had 79 young people with an identified risk level of exploitation across North Yorkshire. And that caveat in there of there are 79 young people that we know about. I would imagine there's a lot of other young people out there where we haven't quite picked up those signs just yet. But they're the young people that we have with an identified risk status. We are actually seeing at the minute an upwards trajectory in the number of young people that we do have identified for exploitation. We're sort of seeing around our highest numbers for certainly the last few years. And to just put that into a little bit of context, around this time last year, we sort of sat around kind of the 60, 70 mark. So again, we've got an increase. Interestingly enough, though, a lot of that increase is in our young people with a low level risk. So it may well be that we are now becoming a little bit more aware of kind of picking up those early signs. And that might be why we're getting an increase in those lower numbers. But lots of kind of theories and hypotheses to explore around that and that increase in numbers. Interestingly enough as well, we have a higher number of young people identified as being at risk of criminal exploitation than we do as sexual exploitation. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, with the, you know, we know more about the physical places and spaces where young people may be being exploited. And there's that kind of perhaps gap of knowledge in relation to the online world and the way that young people are being sexually exploited online. So again, that's something that we want to be looking at in terms of ongoing training and development. Normally, we tend to have a kind of a 50-50 split in relation to our male and female. You can see a slightly heavier shift towards male. That tends to correlate with the fact that we have more males who are at risk of criminal exploitation and more females that are at risk of sexual exploitation. So that kind of balances with the shift that we've got more young people in general linked to criminal exploitation. So we've got an average age currently with young people with a risk status of 15. Now, I really kind of want to drill home the point here that we have a lot of young people who have a risk status as well. So we do have some who are in that transition period, sort of around the ages of 10 and 11. So I know we've got people here from secondary schools and primary schools, and I think we did a lot on this in the October conference around the importance of having this understanding around exploitation in a primary school setting as well, because it's sad to say, but it is happening and it's something that we need to be aware of. I wanted to kind of share with you a couple of our kind of emerging themes and trends, or presenting themes and trends that are happening in North Yorkshire at the minute. The first one, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of virtual heads nodding at the minute, is in relation to vaping and young people vaping at the minute. And I'm aware that there's a lot of concerns around kind of young people vaping. I want to kind of speak more specifically around vaping and exploitation today. So especially in our MACE level 2 meetings, we are getting a lot of information and intelligence around the use of vapes amongst young people, but particularly those concerns around the buying and selling of vapes and how this could be potentially linked to exploitation. We have had some concerns that have been raised as well about young people mixing additional substances into vapes. So again, I'm sure that I think you've had some stuff through to schools already, and there'll be some public health work that's being done and being shared in due course around, again, mixing these substances into MACE. So we've had reports of THC, which is a psychoactive substance in cannabis, and also spice being mixed into vapes, and it's causing some really nasty side effects amongst young people. But also we're finding, again, going back to exploitation in terms of vape shops and online sales of vapes, we are sort of seeing that we're getting intelligence about them being possible locations of concern. So it's a big piece of work that we're looking at, especially in our MACE level 2 meetings. I'm sure there's lots of you here that come to our MACE level 2 meetings, but the plea is always, you are working and speaking to all these young people and gathering all this information about vaping, where they're buying them, who they're buying them from. That information really needs to come through in the partnership intelligence form. So I'll move on to that later, and I'll make sure you've got the links. Another trend, it's not emerging, it's been kind of ongoing for a while in North Yorkshire, is the use of edibles. I'm sure you'll have had bits shared before. I know when Emma was doing the mace roll, she shared a lot around kind of the pictures of the sweets and things, but I wanted to share this picture on the right hand side of the screen, the levels packet. This was seized probably about a month ago locally and was shared by one of our officers, but you can just see in relation to how clever these perpetrators are in terms of this packaging, how close it looks to a Revels packet, how appealing it is to young people. They're designing these things to look like sweets, and again we've had reports of sort of jelly sweets, things that look like little oranges or watermelons and things like that, so just things to be aware of in those school settings. And then finally, this will keep coming back up, is in relation to these online places and spaces. We've already spoken about the online risks and exploitation, but we need to know more about online and how perpetrators are contacting young people online, targeting young people online, the places and spaces young people are communicating online. But interestingly, again, we're getting little bits through in relation to kind of TikTok. So often there can be videos that are presented in relation to kind of make money quick, little TikTok ones that are going around young people. And this has quite strong links to financial exploitation. So, for example, opening bank accounts, holding money, things like that. And nationally, it's going to come as no surprise to you. The National Crime Agency has seen an increase in online grooming crimes of 80% in the last 4 years. So this isn't going anywhere. This is going to keep being an issue, and we need to kind of keep as ahead of the game as we can, really, in relation to just kind of learning about online, because it evolves so quickly. So we're going to have a quick look at warning signs. I don't propose to go over this in any kind of length or detail, because again, we covered this a lot in October, but there's lots of information on our website in relation to warning signs and things like that as well. But again, back in the chat bar for me, please, if you can add just a few things that you think would be signs of exploitation that you would maybe pick up in a school or in a community. Yeah, just some of those warning signs that a young person may be being exploited, please. Lovely. So we've got absence coming up, new clothes, items, changes in behaviour, new clothes, money, phone, gifts, expensive trainers, lots of new things, changes in behaviour, new friends. Brilliant. Right, Hayden, you can ping up the other one now. Thank you. Right, yeah, really, that's a really good one. Adult vocab, Rebecca, I think that's really good. Older friends, withdrawn, changes in behaviour, excellent. So I've given you a little bit of a list here. This is not a definitive list by any stretch of the imagination. It's perhaps some of the more well-known signs. So again, most of them you've already said in relation to young people going missing, changes in behaviour and appearance and friends, new possessions, perhaps unexplained injuries, online use. Again, we know young people spend a lot of time online, but it's perhaps the changes in the online use and young people spending time in perhaps new places. The one word I'd like you to maybe focus on is change. So there's a few people who kind of perhaps pick up on these perhaps more obvious signs in terms of change in behaviour. And it even says here people becoming a little bit more secretive, fearful, withdrawn, aggressive. It can actually be almost like the polar opposite to that as well, if you think about it. And I'll go back to what, the session we did in October. Some of you may have seen or remember the Alfie video. When a young person's being targeted by a perpetrator, they are perhaps sometimes given emotionally things that they've maybe not had for a while in terms of respect and a feeling of belonging. So that can lead to a change in behaviour that can sometimes present as a little bit more positive. They may be feeling a little bit better about themselves and a little bit more confident. So it's really being mindful of a change rather than just thinking, they've become more secretive and fearful and withdrawn. That might be it. Another thing that's come out recently when we've had some locality discussions around these signs is in relation to possessions. Now, again, probably well publicised warning signs are in relation to kind of new and expensive clothes and trainers and things like that. Now, perpetrators are again very sadly picking up on the cost of living crisis. So for some young people, that new possession might just be a regular pair of trainers, or a pair that's not broken, or a meal or something like that, which again is just something to be really mindful of. And it's something that has really come out of, we've recently done some deep dive audit work into our cases of exploitation. And I think one of the things that really kind of shone was in relation to partners are really good at picking up some of the warning signs, but perhaps some of those softer indicators and those changes aren't being considered as a possible sign of exploitation early enough. So it's really something to kind of go back and have a bit of a think about and share with teams, really. Okay, Hayden, next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to skim over our MACE processes. It is all on our website. But again, if you have those early signs and worries, what next? What do you do? And in North Yorkshire, our processes for supporting young people who are at risk of exploitation are detailed in our MACE strategy. So that states that all children in North Yorkshire who are vulnerable to exploitation and abuse are effectively identified and protected by services, delivered in a coordinated and informed way, consistently responding to the risks and improving the outcomes for our children, their families and the wider community. So, if a child's identified as being potentially at risk of exploitation, it would go through the normal safeguarding referral form to children and families. This is then received by our multi-agency screening team, and we've got that kind of partnership of professionals who are involved in the screening and of the referrals and kind of deciding that right service at the right time for that family. If, as part of that screening, there is identified risks in relation to exploitation, the allocated worker will be asked to complete an exploitation risk assessment. And then, of course, if any specific contextual safeguarding concerns come out of that, that information is shared with our MACE Level 2 meetings, which I'll get onto in a moment. Hayden, if you can move on, please. So again, just to clarify, and I'm aware there are some people who are heavily immersed in our MACE processes and know this inside out and back to front, but I'm also aware that for some people this is a little bit unknown. And I think sometimes the unknown can be a little bit scary and you feel like you might not be as sure about coming or joining in. So I'm always about kind of demystifying these processes. But in relation to our MACE Level 1, really it's about the individual. So once that exploitation risk assessment is completed, the MACE Level 1 meeting is a meeting back at the multi-agency screening team. And it's about ascertaining a level of risk around that individual young person and exploitation. And again, that's done through a multi-agency discussion with children and families workers and police and health colleagues. The meeting results in an agreement as to the risk level for that young person. So that can come out at 4 levels, either low risk, medium risk, high risk, or no risk, if no risk has been found. And then the plans are put in place and reviewed based on that level of risk. So if you've got a high risk young person, they're obviously going to be reviewed a lot more regularly than a young person who has come in at low risk. Now, our Level 2 meetings have a different focus. So these are our monthly virtual meetings chaired across our 7 locality, not allowed to say district areas anymore. And they're relating to those links between those children at risk of exploitation with the perpetrators and the individuals who pose that risk by exploitation, as well as locations that may pose that risk of harm, and really building that community intelligence. So we kind of hit 4 real key components, as already said: the identification and assessment of perpetrators, sharing of community intelligence related to the perpetrators and the locations of concern, really building a picture around those community links who pose that risk. And that includes information raised by other local authorities and kind of around surrounding North Yorkshire as well. And key to this is really developing robust locality partnership plans to develop intelligence, pursue and prosecute perpetrators and disrupt exploitation. So that's the time when we can work together. We've got everyone round the table. There's no hierarchy in these meetings and there's no silly questions in these meetings. It's the time we can all get together and be really creative about what we do to disrupt some of this. And I'll get onto disruption in a couple of slides. Hayden, if you can move on, please. Thank you. I'm going to touch on trafficking and modern slavery and the national referral mechanism. There's a lot on this, and I'm going to give you a really whistle-stop tour. Again, if people are aware of the process, great. If you're not, please take the time to kind of look on the Be Aware website, and it's got all the 1-minute guides and all the processes, but I think it's just something to kind of keep fresh in people's minds. So the national referral mechanism is a framework for identifying victims of trafficking, slavery, servitude and forced or compulsory labour, and ensuring they receive that right support. So all police and local authority staff have a legal duty to refer anyone they think may potentially be a victim, and they're not expected to be sure. So if a child is being used for the benefit of others to commit any crime, to work inappropriately, to take part in any sexual activity, and they're being moved or kept for that purpose, they are being trafficked, and an NRM must be completed. And when we talk about movement, often we hear a lot in the news or perhaps covered in the press about the movement of young people across county or even from one country to another. You know, you hear a lot about county lines and things like that. The movement of a young person can be one hotel room to another hotel room. It can be one street to another street. You know, it's these things that are happening. You know, groomers are moving young people. It doesn't have to be across the county line. Like I say, it can be down the road, and it still classes as movement. And again, if they're being kept, similarly, like say in a hotel room or in a house, can count as trafficking. So North Yorkshire and City of York, we're currently taking part in a pilot of devolved decision making. So that means that the decisions around whether a child's been subjected to modern slavery or human trafficking sits within our local decision making panel, instead of in other areas not part of the pilot, where that sits nationally with a Home Office decision. And just quickly, just kind of looking at the definition of trafficking, and it explores 3 key component parts. So you've got the action, basically what's happened, the recruitment, the transportation, things like that. The means, how it's been done through coercion or fraud, loss of power, and the purpose. So that may be for sexual exploitation, to commit a crime, slavery. But one of the key things I want you to remember here is those people who are under the age of 18 can't consent to their own exploitation. So when we're looking at an NRM decision, the means bit we don't have to consider. We don't have to prove that there's been fraud or coercion or anything like that in order to prove that a child's being trafficked. Okay, next slide, please, Hayden. Thank you. Right, disruption. So the definition of disruption: to prevent something, a system or a process or event, from continuing as usual, as expected. It's really broad, and when we talk about exploitation, it can often just be attributed to the work of police and perhaps children and family service social workers, for example. So we talk about police making arrests, we talk about that individual plan around a young person and the support in place. However, it's really important to think about disruption on a much larger scale, and as a multifaceted approach from a really wide variety of partners. So back on the chat bar, I'm getting you all involved today. Have a little bit of a think about what partners can do in terms of disruption of exploitation, or which partners can be involved. So not just children and families workers and police, who else can be involved in the disruption of exploitation of young people, and what sort of things can they do? Who's going to be first in on the chat? Great, lovely. So we've got neighbours observing things, club leaders and sports coaches. Great one. Anyone else coming in? Parents, brilliant. Friends and peers, yeah, young people themselves. Fabulous, thank you. So yeah, there's a lot of other partners who can really be involved in relation to disruption. So I've said police, we've got things like British Transport Police as well, street wardens, local businesses and community services. We've said about sports clubs, religious settings and clubs, leisure facilities, Schools and educations, that's why you're all here. Parents and carers and those networks around young people. And let's not forget the young people themselves and the support that they can offer in terms of disruption with peers and friendship groups. And that's what I've said, that's what those level 2 meetings are all about. It's about coming together, thinking about that disruption and what it looks like. So yeah, moving away from that tendency to focus on the victim. So it's important to focus on the perpetrators of exploitation and the locations where the exploitation is taking place to have that really effective disruption. Otherwise, sadly, we run the risk of just displacing the issue and the perpetrators will move from one young person or one group to another. And we really need to kind of think about disruption in different levels. Sorry about that. So we have that kind of preventative level, right, really early intervention, that raising awareness, the campaigns, the schoolwork, PSHE lessons, all that stuff, the stuff we've done with you guys in DSL, and training to spot those really early signs. You know, are the people who are in those places and spaces, the park wardens, the people that, you know, security guards at the shops, do they know what those signs are, and importantly what to do if they see something they're not quite sure about? That's the work that we're doing at the minute. And then we can look at to a little bit more kind of physical disruption, you know, those identifications of the hotspots and that coordinated partnership approach, finding and rooting out those pieces of intelligence to piece those bits of the jigsaw together so we can get that picture of what's going on, building in those commission services, bringing in interventions from police, such as like child abduction warning notices. And it can be really simple pieces of work. You know, we can link with trading standards. If we've got concerns about a shop or something like that, trading standards can go in and do kind of blind testing with young people or customers. Or even just things like, you know, if you've got an area of concern and we've got a street lighting issue and the, you know, perpetrators are kind of picking up on that area because it's dark and not monitored, what can we do? We can look at putting street lighting in, we can look at putting CCTV in. So it's building that picture. And as always, that sharing of intelligence is really vital. Can you move on, please, Hayden? Thank you. I'm not going to touch on Be Aware, but from a preventative point of view, this is kind of your one-stop shop. We've got loads of information around exploitation here, and also when we're talking about parents and young people being real key factors in this disruption, we've got those resources for parents and young people as well around talking about exploitation, understanding what it looks like. Can you move on, please, Hayden? I just want to have a little touch on language and exploitation. This was a piece of work that we did last year in a task and finish group around the use of our language when speaking and writing about young people who are victims of exploitation. And I'm going to just share a video. It's only a minute or two long. Hopefully sound will come through. But yeah, Hayden, you all right to share it, please?
These are real statements that professionals have used to describe victims of child sexual exploitation.
The language you use matters.
It affects how people see us.
It makes us feel like what's been done to us is our fault.
And it makes us feel less of a person.
Professionals need to recognise our vulnerability.
We want you to see us as children and as victims.
The only person that should be blamed is the perpetrator.
We depend on you professionals to keep us safe.
Negative language reinforces negative attitudes to victims of exploitation.
And negative attitudes leads to systematic failures to protect us.
Helping us starts with the language you use, so choose it carefully.
Thank you.
So it's a really powerful video. The lad holding the little board up saying he's an attention seeker, she dresses provocatively. It's language that unfortunately has been used, putting himself at risk. It has been used by partners. We know as a partnership we've done a lot of work around language, and it doesn't always get used now, but unfortunately it does sometimes get brought up by the way young people are talking and writing about young people. So we've got a series of multi-agency practice principles in relation to language, and those real key points of consideration about primarily how you'd feel if you were a parent or young person and you saw someone write or say those things about you and what was happening to you, and you were a victim and you were being described as putting yourself at risk. So it's really key points for consideration. Again, we've put it all together in a pack. We've put some professional questions for reflection together. So if you want to take that back to your teams and again deliver like a little bit of work around that and have a reflective time, you've got the resource there to do it. Thank you. Right, partnership information sharing form. I think I've drilled this into you enough for the last 20 odd minutes, but this really is our key form for sharing those really vital bits of information that you will hold as professionals. I would imagine that most of you have probably got a little snippet of information that you are sat feeling a little bit uncomfortable with at the minute. Not in relation to a safeguarding concern, because we know that you follow the safeguarding concerns in relation to that. But you may have picked up about, I don't know, there's a car hanging around outside, or young people are talking about meeting at a certain place which just doesn't fit quite right with you. The information doesn't, you feel like you need to share it, but you're not quite sure where. So that concerning incident, that suspicious activity, if you're picking up on any unusual exchanges between two or more people, or, you know, the stuff that just makes you feel that little bit uncomfortable, we need that from the partnership information sharing form. It needs to be submitted in that way. It's a completely safe and secure police system. So we won't know where it's come from in terms of sharing that intelligence, and you don't need the consent to share it. Often partners will come to me and go, well, I only know that it's this make of car. I don't even got the reg for it. Do I need to submit it? Yes, you do, because someone else might have the reg or that other little bit of information, and police then put the pieces together, bring that to us at Mace Level 2, and we can then share it and say, right, we've got this car, we've got this reg. We need to know where that car's going, who that car's linking with. So the only thing again with this I would just ask is, again, if you're in a multi-agency meeting and you are having a discussion around a piece of intelligence, even if you sat with a police officer, make sure that you have as an action in that meeting who will submit that intelligence, because the police won't do it as standard. And sometimes you think, oh, they've taken it in, it's going to go back. It's got to go through this form and this system. So just have an agreement, make sure it's written down as an action and that's followed up on. Again, we've talked about vaping. This is a real kind of area of key interest that we need to know more about. So if you're picking stuff up in schools around buying and selling of vapes, where young people are getting vapes from, anything that's being added into vapes, please submit that as intelligence as soon as possible. Right, final updates from me. Just in relation to be aware, a couple of additional resources that we've put on for you. So we did some consultation work with our PSHE leads at the back end of last year, and they asked for, and this came out of the October conference as well, asked for kind of a national lesson plans and resources to kind of deliver specifically in schools. Now, we haven't written anything bespoke because there's some amazing stuff already out there. What I've done is I've collated it. I've tried to put it into kind of primary, secondary and SEND categories, but you can have a look at the resources. It's down to you to kind of decide what will fit best with your class, but there's some amazing lesson plans that are out there. We've touched on financial exploitation. It's quite emerging, so I've put some resources on there in our criminal exploitation section from the Children's Society, and we've also put some stuff on from the National Working Group in relation to safeguarding in sport, so again, something to share and promote. In relation to MACE updates, I'm really pleased to say that we've now appointed a child exploitation and contextual safeguarding officer. So for those of you who have been attending our level 2 meetings, you'll know that for the last 6 months or so, we've had a rotational chair between police and specialist social workers. Gemma, who's our new officer, is due to start hopefully next week. and she will be coming in after a period of induction, and we'll be having that oversight right across all our level 2 meetings. So it'll be really helpful to cover that kind of consistent approach and for gathering the information across the areas. I've mentioned our deep dive audit. We'll do a little bit of piece of work around that, and any additional findings will go through our operational group, and whether we've got any actions that we need to look at in relation to training or learning. And it's really, I'm really excited to say that hopefully in June, we're going to be running some face-to-face MACE development sessions for all our MACE partners. So for our attendees at MACE Level 2, even if you're not coming to our MACE Level 2 meetings, please contact us and you can get on the mailing list, and we'd love to see you at those meetings. But please come to our development sessions. It'll be the first time we've got together as a MACE partnership for 3 years now. So it'll be lovely. We're really looking forward to those, and I'll get that out to you as soon as possible. And again, at the end of the year, we have our strategy review. So we're going to be really focusing on our priorities moving forwards into the next few years in relation to MACE. OK, that's it from me, Hayden. If you move on to the next slide, I'm happy to take any questions, but I think I've run over a lot. So if you want to put any in the chat, I can pick up on them later on.
Thank you, Kat, for that. There's no questions in the chat. So if you do have anything, obviously you've got Kat's email address. Please do use that. I'll hand over now to Helen Smith, who's the Early Years Strategy Manager. Helen, over to you.
Lovely, thank you ever so much. Good morning, everyone. I'll say again, I'll do a cat. I'll say good morning, sort of with my camera on, and then I'll turn my camera on off so that we sort of save the internet and everything. So I just want to say good morning. I know some of you probably are from secondary school, but I think it's just worth reminding that actually we can't ever dilute the importance of early years and the impact of what happens in that 0 to 5 years for children. Obviously has an impact on life chances and what happens, you know, for those children later on. We know that 90% of the brain development happens before they're 5 years old. So again, it's about putting these things into context and what's happened to that child sort of early on. We did have an early years masterclass last night that was 2 hours long. And so if you are from a primary school with early years and you want to see that recording, that will be available in the usual format, and it'll be on Key Messages. So I will turn my camera off now. So next slide, please, Hayden. So we know that more and more schools are taking sort of 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds into the settings. So it's just a reminder that it's essential for head teachers and DSLs to understand the requirements of the statutory framework and to provide that care and quality as well as the education for our youngest children. So basically the whole of section 3 in the statutory framework covers the wider safeguarding and welfare responsibility of all providers working with those children in the early years foundation stage. So again, as a head teacher, it's about making sure that you're familiar with those roles and responsibilities to those youngest children in the school. One thing I would sort of highlight is that at least one person has got to have a current first aid certificate and be on the premises and available at all times when children are present, and accompany them if they're going on an outing. And again, that's in Annex A at the back of the statutory framework, but that does include helping a baby or child who's choking and helping a baby or a child who's got a foreign body in their ears, eyes or nose. So next slide, please, Hayden. So in the statutory framework, this was put in with the revised framework in 2021. It's about good oral hygiene. I put the paragraph there, and we have been doing a lot of work about promoting oral health and also having supervised toothbrushing sessions, which the last 2 are available for the 0 to 11 age range, and they're Tuesday the 16th of May and Wednesday the 14th of June. So I'm not sure if there are places left, but if you've not got on those, please do. Tooth decay is largely preventable, and it is a really serious problem in young children. Nearly a quarter of 5-year-olds in England have got tooth decay, with 3 or 4 teeth affected on average. and tooth extractions are the most common procedures for children under 6 in hospital. And obviously, children from more deprived backgrounds are more likely to have tooth decay. And it's not just the tooth decay, it's the toothache, it's the needing the treatment, it's the pain, it's the infection, it's that negative experience of children. Maybe the first time they go to a dentist is to have extractions, which is not a good start. But then there's the wider effect as well, problems on eating, sleeping, socialising, talking, self-esteem, and obviously learning. And then the wider impact on society, where children, if they've got to be at home because they've got toothache, that actually parents have got to be away from work as well. So again, there's lots that early years providers and nurseries can be doing to promote oral health, reading stories about teeth and smiles. Obviously, in the statutory framework, fresh water should be available, talking about healthy food and what's not healthy, and promoting good toothbrushing, and with that parental partnership with parents. So next slide, please, Hayden. So again, as I've touched on, linked in with oral health, linked in with overall good child development, food safety comes in, and I just want to talk a little bit about choking and food safety. And there will be a slide that does have an awful picture. So please, if you do find it upsetting, please sort of leave the thing for just a couple of seconds. So next slide, please. So within the statutory framework, there is that duty to actually ensure that children are safe, and especially when it comes to food hygiene. Tragically, 1 child a month dies each month from choking, but hundreds more require hospital treatment. Young children's immune systems are not as developed as adults, so they are more vulnerable to infections leading to food poisoning. So if you are preparing food and serving food to young children in your nursery and school, extra care with hygiene and food preparation is absolutely paramount. Children must be adequately supervised whilst eating, and there is that balance between encouraging children to be independent, sort of like letting them cut up their own fruit, etc. But equally, there is absolutely that responsibility to make sure that children are supervised. Again, before admitting a child into your nursery, into your reception, obtain that information about special dietary requirements, food allergies, and any special health requirements. And again, we know, we've had an instance, where a child was in a PVI nursery, but they took their lunches in a school lunch facility. The early years providers knew that the child had an egg allergy. The school cook knew they did. But for some reason, there was a lack of handover between the person who actually gave the child the food, and the early years provider assumed it was not an egg product, but unfortunately it wasn't. So that child sort of had a severe reaction because they had an egg allergy. So again, it's just been, it's having that extra vigilance with things like that. So the next slide, please. This is the slide that you may find a bit upsetting. This is a picture of little Oliver Steeper, who you may have heard of his parents. His parents are now very, very vocal in campaigning about ratios and things with the government. Sadly, Oliver died after choking on food in a nursery in 2021. He was given, thankfully it wasn't in North Yorkshire, but he was given food that was not appropriate for his age. It wasn't pureed, and obviously he was rushed to hospital, but unfortunately he died. So that is sort of like the worst case scenario, and we want to do as much as we can to prevent anything like that. So it is about that vigilance and about making sure that things are appropriate for these children. Next slide, please, Hayden. Every school, if you've got early years foundation stage children, this is the link in the EYFS statutory framework 3.49 with the footnote 56, where there's examples to menus. These posters can be downloaded. I know I've had conversations with the catering team, and these posters should be available and up in the sort of like food preparation areas. And at the bottom of the early years food choking one, there is a link to explain how to stop children from choking and how to resuscitate a child as well. And so there is lots of information out there. And again, it's being mindful of that food preparation and not sort of making assumptions about children's allergies and things. So it's little things that obviously make a massive difference, like cutting grapes, strawberries, cherry tomatoes. They should be cut lengthways and into quarters. Sausages should be cut into strips. You know, children shouldn't be given marshmallows or jelly cubes from a packet to eat, or as part of messy play, which sometimes happens because actually they can get stuck in their throat. So again, it's just that extra vigilance. Next slide, please. Again, talking about choking, as I said right at the beginning, button batteries, they are a huge risk, and button batteries can badly hurt or kill a child if they're swallowed and they get stuck in their windpipe. Button batteries are found in lots of toys, lots of gadgets, and everyday objects. And within just 2 hours of swallowing them, the battery fluid can erode vital tissues. Obviously, in an emergency, if there is any kind of suspicion that a child has swallowed a button battery, take to A&E or ring 999 straight away. And some of the things, you know, you mustn't let your child, you know, if you suspect that a child has eaten a button battery, don't let them eat or drink anything. Don't try and make them be sick, and sort of trust your instincts, act fast, and it's better to be wrong than not do anything. And one of the absolute things that is specific about button battery ingestion is that if a child vomits, it's bright red blood. It's completely different. So actually, if that happens, seek immediate medical help. The capped poster is that it is available in 17 different community languages. Have we time, Hayden, to play that YouTube? Because I think we're a little bit behind, aren't we? It's 2 minutes long. Have we got time, Hayden, or?
Yeah, we should have, because it's only 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. If we can try and just play that.
Ready? Yeah. Steady, go.
All it took was a tiny watch battery to devastate this little girl's health. After she swallowed the button battery, it burned through Valeria's food and windpipes. This is the latest of many operations at London's Great Ormond Street Hospital to try to repair the damage. For the past year, the 3-year-old has been fed through a tube into her stomach and has a bag to collect her saliva. Her mother, Jelena, who's Russian, says it has turned their lives upside down. She hopes Valeria will eventually recover.
Essentially, this battery starts working in the esophagus.
Surgeons at Great Ormond Street Hospital are seeing one child a month with caustic soda burns caused by button batteries.
The most important thing is to be aware that these are extremely dangerous and should be treated essentially like a poison and be kept out of the reach of children.
Let's mimic what can happen when a button battery gets lodged in a child's throat. The ham represents the delicate lining of the esophagus, and water, saliva. I'll cover this side, but put another battery here so we can see the chemical reaction that happens. We've left this for just 2 hours, and already a huge amount of damage has been done. If I lift the button battery, you can see all this black marked area. Eventually, this would have burnt its way right through the ham. Same thing with the child's throat.
Look, when I turn the clock.
When Amari from Newcastle swallowed a button battery last year, doctors warned her mum there could be life-changing injuries.
They said that her vocal cords could be damaged then and there, and she would never actually in fact develop a voice. And again, they'd said that if she did pull through, she may never eat again because the esophagus may have been too badly damaged. Just truly terrifying.
Getting ready for her party today.
Fortunately, the 2-year-old has made a complete recovery, but it's a warning to parents to keep toddlers away from button batteries. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
So the next slide is about magnets as well, super strong magnets. These are 10 times stronger than ordinary magnets. And again, they can rip through a child's gut if they are swallowed. And obviously, they are extremely serious and life-threatening. Children swallow the magnets. That they're found in lots of different things: magnetic beads, jewellery kits, magnetic balls from building kits, magnets in building block toys, and magnetic dartboards, fridge magnets. In one incident where a child was taken into hospital, an 18-month-old child had actually swallowed 23 magnets after getting hold of a toy belonging to an older child. So again, doctors are increasingly worried about the number of children being admitted into hospital after they've actually swallowed magnets, and this has increased in the last 4 years. So again, the same kind of symptom signs as button batteries. And again, it's about acting quickly. And there's a quote there from a mum of a 3-year-old who actually has ingested a magnetic ball. He was playing with a magnetic ball, and sometimes those magnets can look like colourful sweets, and he put them in his mouth. And again, when they actually took him to hospital, he'd actually got 29 magnetic balls, and he had to have sort of part of his intestines removed and 14 holes within his intestines. So luckily, he did survive, but it's just, please be mindful. And obviously, if you've got your own children or staff with children as well. Next slide, please, Hayden. Oh, sorry, that's just another one just about button batteries. Next slide, please, Hayden. I just want to touch on child abuse linked to faith and faith or beliefs, including witchcraft. Again, at the top of here, there's a YouTube clip, and it is a really powerful YouTube clip about a little boy. And it's about 8 minutes long. So when you get the presentation, please have a look at that. But the reason why we've done a lot of work with the Safeguarding Partnership is one of our early years providers was questioned by Ofsted about child abuse linked to witchcraft. And even though it was available sort of on the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Partnership website, it wasn't very visible. And so we've done a lot to actually improve that visibility of child abuse linked to faith, belief and witchcraft. And in one of my conversations with our Ofsted regulatory inspectors, and we were talking about the fact that it doesn't mention specifically witchcraft in inspecting safeguarding early years, what Ofsted actually says is other issues not listed here, but that pose a risk to children, learners and vulnerable adults. So basically what Ofsted can say is it's anything umbrella that actually can have an impact on that child. And the other thing I just want to touch on is that oral infant mutilation. And again, if you've not heard of this is where a child may have a temperature because they might be teething. And in some cultures and beliefs, it's when the little teeth buds are coming through. And so they actually think that those teeth buds that are coming through are actually tooth worms. And that's what's actually causing the infection and the high temperatures. So they remove those tooth buds using obviously not sterile equipment. Bicycle implements, spanners and things like that. They've been used, and obviously this causes a massive impact on children's sort of teeth, the teeth that then come through on their speech, on their mouths, on their whole everything. So again, if you're not aware of that, just be mindful of that, because Ofsted are looking at those wider safeguarding issues. Next slide, please. So again, as Hayden said right at the beginning, internet safety. I mean, we know that children, young children especially, they're actually moving away from television, and YouTube Kids is now the destination choice of 72% of children aged 3 to 4 years old. And so they are moving away from TV, and they're opting for that video on demand content on video sharing platforms to watch cartoons and movies and songs. We know that the internet can be beneficial. We know it promotes creativity and learning, etc. But we also have those challenges of screen use as well, including sort of impacts on children's ability to control their emotions, that displacement of activities that promote social interactions, which is vital for development, and the risk of exposure to inappropriate content. The Royal College of Paediatrics published a guidance for parents suggesting that there is no safe amount of screen time, but what is vitally important is the quality of what children are consuming that will have the impact. Therefore, it's the content and the context of screen time that becomes absolutely central to actually children getting the most out of online use. Next slide, please, Hayden. So just to sort of finish with this, it's actually, children should be taught about safe internet use. There's lots of information out there. The links on here will take you through to sort of like further information. So it's about your nursery provisions, having those conversations with children, having conversations with parents about being safe, about them accessing safe material online, but keeping themselves safe as well online. And again, if you want to look at the NSPCC PANTS online, that's a fantastic resource that you can share with the younger children. And that is me. Thank you ever so much. I know it was a whistle-stop one, and hopefully I've made up a little bit of time.
And just to say, we will be uploading the masterclass from yesterday evening, where we do give a presentation on the PANTS campaign as well, so you can access that from the early years masterclass yesterday evening.
Yeah, I've just seen one question in the chat bar. Assuming meals, our preschool children. I mean, yes, obviously they obviously comply with sort of quality but it's about that extra vigilance. It's about if a child has got an allergy, a nut allergy, an egg allergy. It's about if those caterers are then passing that food over to somebody else in the dining hall or something. It's about making sure that there is that continuity of knowledge about those children's allergies and things. So thank you.
I think there's another question in there as well, something about the copy of the slides for Colburn School to be sent. Not sure what that relates to. Yeah, I mean, I think all the slides will be shared, won't they, Hayden, afterwards? We share the YouTube video afterwards, so you'll get access to all of this information through our YouTube channel, and the links will be in the description and stuff like that as well. So any links that are on there will be as part of the YouTube channel as well. Okay, I don't think there are any more questions, so thank you very much, Helen. I'm now going to hand over to Kelly Osborne, who's our safeguarding advisor for North Yorkshire Council. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Hayden. Welcome everyone. Yeah, I'm Kelly Osborne, safeguarding advisor. So myself and a colleague were sort of appointed for the start of the academic year back in September. Met many of you who are at the meeting today, and this is an area we often discuss, you know, when I do go and support with enhancing safeguarding procedures at the setting. So hopefully this is informative. I feel there's a lot of information on the slides, but I didn't want to miss anything out, and obviously it's to give you that sort of knowledge and where to go for regarding low-level concerns. So like Helen and Kat, I will turn off my camera. Okay, so thanks, Hayden. So this is the overview of my session today. Like I said, there's a lot sort of involved in low-level concerns. This is sort of an overview of what I'm going to be discussing. Low-level concerns, just to clarify, is around staff, not low-level concerns around children. This is to do with adults working in your settings. So there you can see the overview. I'll just quickly go through it, and then obviously we can start to discuss these a little bit further. So first of all, you know, what does low-level concerns mean? Then we'll be looking at the Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022 and the reference that's in that document. We'll then be looking at a case study, Nigel Leet, where you'll see that there was lots of missed opportunities in that particular case. I will then be sharing with you the NYS low-level concerns template, which you can adopt and use in your own settings, referring to the guidance for safer working practice, discussing low-level concerns policy, and if you wanted to write one of those for your own setting, I've got advice of where to go for that. Communication and awareness raising within your own schools around low-level concerns, why we feel that you know how you would and why you would respond to low-level concerns in your setting, and what do colleges and schools need to do, and then some examples of low-level concerns as well, because I know that's come up, you know, sort of frequently with the schools that I'm supporting. They'll ask, you know, often ask those questions around, well, this is a particular member of staff and this is what happens, would you class that as a low-level concern? So I'll just give you some examples of those. Your duty to report the concerns, and then just sort of some extra information at the end about what schools should be doing, what staff should be doing, and then obviously this is sort of very much linked to LADO as well, which I'll sort of explain a little bit more later on in the session. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, if you do have any questions, like Kat and Helen said, if you pop them in the chat, and then I will get back to you after the presentation. I'm just conscious of the time. I don't want to steal any of Julie's time as well, but yeah, I'll obviously get back to you with any sort of misconceptions or any advice you need. Thank you. Okay, so obviously low-level concerns, important part in the new Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022. So this is like the overview and the explanation of actually what a low-level concern is. So the term low-level concern does not mean that it is insignificant. A low-level concern is any concern, no matter how small, and even if no more than causing a sense of unease or a nagging doubt that an adult working in or on behalf of the school or college may have acted in a way that is inconsistent with the staff code of conduct, so your staff behaviour policy, including inappropriate conduct outside of work as well. So this isn't just about low-level concerns and those sort of nagging doubts regarding staff and adults within school settings. It's also things outside of work as well. And also those low-level concerns are things that does not meet the harm threshold, or is otherwise not serious enough to consider referral to LADO. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, obviously it's also mentioned in your child protection policy, the North Yorkshire. So this is the statement there that you've all got in your own policies that you will have adopted. So it's about how you as a school and a setting actually sort of, you know, have those allegations reported and what you do with those. And that's obviously your decision as a school as well, and how actually you record those. Thank you. Okay, another part here in keeping children safe. So it's obviously part 4 of the document, section 2, and it's around concerns or allegations that do not meet the harm threshold. So in other words, don't meet that LADO threshold. So obviously, you know, your governing bodies and proprietors, they should make sure that you have all your policies and your processes in place. So it's really important that you sort of get your governors on board with this as well. Schools that I go in and support, I advise that, you know, the safeguarding team, including the DSL, DDSL and the safeguarding governor, would discuss low level concerns at the setting, discuss how these are going to be recorded, discuss, you know, potentially putting a policy together, which I do think is, you know, really advantageous, and I think it sort of protects yourself and the staff as well. So 424, as part of their whole school or college approach to safeguarding, schools and colleges should ensure that they promote an open and transparent culture in which all concerns about all adults working in or on behalf of the school or college, and that includes supply, volunteers and contractors, are dealt with promptly and appropriately. And I think, you know, that section there is key. And I think it is about having that open culture, and, you know, it's making sure that the low level concerns are shared with staff, you know, whether that's in a briefing or a staff meeting. We'll talk about that more a little bit later in my presentation. And it's making sure that staff feel confident and comfortable about sharing those sort of niggles that they have about other members of staff or adults in the school. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, again, another section in keeping children safe, 425. Again, it's creating that culture where it's sharing that information, and it is that shared responsibility, because it's making sure that actually that low level concern is recorded and is dealt with appropriately. And if it's implemented correctly, that should enable schools and colleges to identify inappropriate, problematic or concerning behaviour early, and it's minimising that risk. I mean, some sort of examples when I have gone into schools and spoken about this, you know, those sort of odd little niggles that other staff members have had about another adult in school, you know, if it's just recorded as a one-off to one member of staff, and then another concern regarding the same member of staff is reported to a different member of staff, they can't then create that bigger picture and see a pattern in that particular adult's behaviour. So it's about deciding as a setting how you're going to record that, who's going to be monitoring and tracking those different behaviours as well. The adult may have acted in a way that is inconsistent with the staff code of conduct, including inappropriate conduct outside of work, like we mentioned before. Okay, so that just covers what I said in the beginning. Thanks, Hayden. So examples of such behaviour. So these are sort of some things that, you know, just to alert you to, you know, things that could be happening in your own setting. So it's things like adults being over friendly with children, having favourites, taking photographs of children on their mobile phone, and that's obviously contrary to school policy, engaging with a child on a one-to-one basis in a secluded area or behind a closed door, or that sort of, you know, humiliating children as well. So all of those are sort of examples of this sort of behaviour that we would class as a low level concern. And it's about giving staff that confidence and creating that culture where actually if they are noticing this within your setting, that actually they would come and report that to the person who they need to go and share that with, whether it's, you know, DSL, head teacher, who that may be. That's your decision. Thank you. Okay, back to keeping children safe. So obviously paragraph 4 to 8, I'm not going to read through all of this, but it's looking at those particular ways and those sources. It's suspicion, it's complaint, disclosures made by a child in the school, or a parent or another adult within or outside of the organisation. So it's making sure that, you know, it is the whole school community, and it's listening, it's those eyes and ears, you know, open and listening for those different sort of concerns that could class as a low level concern. And it's that sort of shared responsibility and making sure that that information is shared with the correct person, which then can be dealt with sort of appropriately and in a timely fashion. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, so this is a case here. I always think it's good to use sort of case studies, particularly if you're sharing this information after I've presented today, that you might share this with your own staff and governors in your own setting. And I think case studies are really helpful in the fact that it sort of shows it does happen, and you know what can actually happen if people aren't doing what they should be doing, and following their sort of professional conduct. So this was a case, Nigel Leet, it was for inappropriate and unprofessional conduct. So I'll just read through because I don't want to miss anything, because there are sort of some important points in here. So Nigel Leet, who was 51, was jailed indefinitely for abusing children at Hillside First School in Weston-super-Mare, and a report carried out by Leet School while he still worked there referred to at least 30 incidents of inappropriate or unprofessional conduct involving the teacher. The serious case review commissioned by the North Somerset Safeguarding Children Board said that the incidents in the school management report ranged from indecent touching to inappropriate lesson content and over familiarity with the children. And that's like what I mentioned before about examples. It's these small sort of, doubts that other members of staff might have about another adult in school, that actually in this case there was 30 incidents that if they were put together it would obviously amount to a real concern. On a number of occasions, colleagues advised the teacher of the inappropriateness of his behaviour and pointed to the risk that he could be accused of professional misconduct, the review said. But however, only 11 of the 30 recorded incidents were reported formally within the school, which is really worrying, and that's and shocking. The incidents included Leet taking photographs of pupils on his mobile phone and kissing and cuddling them. And a teacher also saw Leet in his underpants and a t-shirt whilst getting changed in his classroom. Thanks, Hayden. So again, this is the sort of main concern, I think, with this particular case. It was that common knowledge, and I think when they did the review, it was realizing that actually the teachers were aware of him. They felt uncomfortable by the things he was doing, but actually because this bit of information and those recordings weren't in place, this is why someone like this could do what he did. So the case review said a number of school staff had a variety of concerns about him within a year of his appointment and throughout the time he'd worked there. And early on it was noticed that the teacher had favourite pupils. That was what I mentioned before on the examples, within his class, who were invariably girls. They were often given tasks within the class which were viewed as privileges, as well as being given greater personal attention by the teacher. So again, these are just low level concerns, but actually they build up that bigger picture. It's like those jigsaw pieces. These pupils were allowed to be over familiar with the teacher, who was known to speak and joke with his pupils in a manner which was inappropriately adult. The situation was described by staff to have been common knowledge amongst the school staff, and I think that is the concerning thing for me there. It's the bit I've put in bold. It was common knowledge, which is really quite worrying. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, so there's a little clip here to watch at the time when this was all in the press. If you could play that, thanks, Hayden.
Teacher Nigel Leet was a calculating and cunning child abuser who groomed 6-year-olds in his care for his own perverse pleasure. The inquiry found that it was Leet and Leet alone who was responsible for what happened. But it also found there were lamentable failings in the school by the head teacher, who failed to act on concerns raised.
The review highlights that the culture within the school was endemic, and it prevented people who had concerns from reporting it, and that culture was suppressive.
The then head teacher, Chris Hood, was sacked for his failings. The inquiry found that the culture he imposed at the school meant that only 11 out of 30 concerns were even raised with him at all.
I was surprised at the fact that referrals hadn't been made outside of the school, and it leads to the conclusion that you think how powerful a culture is in a particular setting, and how that culture can override individuals' feelings and concerns.
There could be other Nigel Leets out there, but this report and its recommendations should make it far harder for them to operate and to sour the lives of young children. David Woodland in Weston-super-Mare for the West Country Today.
Okay, thanks, Hayden, for that. So the key things from this case, or if you just go back, thanks, Hayden. So there was obviously, like it said before, no formal mechanism for sharing, recording or handling low-level concerns. And as a result of that, when they were shared, the concerns were shared with different people and each concern was dealt with in isolation. But actually, if you decide as a school who that person is that staff come to if they do have a low level concern, how it's going to be shared, how it's going to be recorded, and obviously how that's going to be handled. So whether that's, you know, discussing it at a safeguarding meeting with yourself and the DDSL, and looking at that information and looking at those patterns, because actually it's about, you know, sort of speaking to those staff involved, giving them support if they need it, and nipping things in the bud before they obviously escalate. So like it said in the video, no one person was aware of all the concerns and no one was therefore able to join those dots and identify that pattern of inappropriate behaviour. And that's what it's all about. The fact that they're being tracked and recorded, you can then identify a pattern in that inappropriate behaviour. Thanks, Hayden. So obviously the concerns were sort of either dismissed as insignificant or misinterpreted, or where they were investigated, they were viewed as isolated. And I think that that's the issue there, the fact they were seen as isolated incident. Nobody had joined the dots, nobody had put the pieces together to obviously then identify these concerns. Nigel Leap pleaded guilty to 36 sexual offences, including 8 counts of penetration of a child under 13, and he possessed 30,500 indecent photographs and 720 indecent films. Thanks, Hayden. So this is the timeline here. This is actually in a document that I'm going to share with you in a minute, to support you in writing your own low-level concerns policy. And this is just one particular individual who it just shows on this timeline here from them starting their employment at a particular school in 2016 to 2021, and the fact that their concerns have been recorded and tracked. You can see all these different incidents occurring, and this would obviously over time be tracked and monitored, and then would have potentially have met the harm threshold for LADO. But unless you do this and unless you record them, you wouldn't be able to do this tracking and this monitoring. And that's why we're saying to you today how important that is. Thank you. Okay, so the NYUS provide a low-level concerns form. So this is something that's available to you in all schools. So I share this with the schools that I support, and this is a way of you actually recording and then obviously being able to then track any low-level concerns that come to you. So again, it's about creating that culture and that transparency in your own settings, sharing this with staff and saying this is, you know, obviously something you're going to be focusing on. You're writing a policy relating to it, so everyone is clear of what the situation is going to be in your own settings. The form is, you know, very straightforward. It literally tells you, you know, what to put in each box, like the details of the concern, obviously factual, who reported it, unless they want to stay anonymous. So obviously all that information that you would need in order to record that is there. Thanks, Hayden. Again, some guidance to support you. This is, I'm sure you've all seen it, guidance for safer working practice is a really important document that you should be using, obviously, for your sort of recruitment processes. And it's when you write your staff behaviour policy, your staff code of conduct, this is a really important guidance to be using for that as well. Thanks, Hayden. I've just seen a message in the chat come through. I think someone was asking for that link. Of course, I can pop that in for you. It's not a problem at all. So if you were wanting to produce your own low-level concerns policy, this is the document to go to. It's a brilliant document. It explains everything that you would need to do in order to develop and implement your own policy within your own setting. At the bottom of the document is a really useful, there's probably about 10 case studies in there, Nigel Leap being one of them, And I think, you know, like I said before, it's really important that you're sharing these case studies with your staff, with your governors, to actually show that if these things aren't recorded, monitored and tracked, then these things can happen in anyone's setting. So really good document, not too lengthy, but yeah, really, really interesting document to read. And like I said, there's some really good case studies at the end that you can use in your own settings for that training. Thanks, Hayden. So like I mentioned before, it's about creating that culture within your own schools. So it's that communication and awareness raising. So, you know, a low level concerns part of your induction process. Have you done staff training around it? So you might have, you know, sort of a staff meeting dedicated to low level concerns and what they are. You know, use parts of my training today. That's absolutely fine. It will be available for you. But then, you know, you might a few weeks later, months later, do it as part of a briefing just to check that everyone is aware of what the low level concerns are and remind them of the procedures in your school as well. Discuss scenarios, case studies, which I've said are at the bottom of the FARA document. Have posters around school, giving, you know, staff that confidence of, you know, actually this is what we would do in our setting if we did have those low level concerns. And it's about creating that culture where individuals feel that actually, you know, things are being monitored and tracked, and things are happening if there is that individual, you're not following the staff code of conduct. You know, and it's about your school values. I know from going around a lot of your settings, you know, you have these values about courage, kindness, respect, integrity, responsibility, and it's about, you know, the SLT modelling those values and their interactions with staff as well. Thanks, Hayden. So why do schools need to respond to low level concerns? Well, I mean, I think that's obvious from everything that I've shared with you this morning. So it's about having those clear procedures for responding to low level concerns, which is part of creating your school culture of openness and trust. And I think that's important. And obviously, in Nigel Leet's case, that wasn't happening within their school. There wasn't that culture, that openness and trust. Some people knew about it, others didn't. Some people, you know, sort of took it to the right person, others didn't. So it's about creating that culture and openness in your settings. It helps ensure that adults consistently model the school's values and helps children to keep children safe. And it will also protect adults working in school from potential false allegations and misunderstandings as well. Okay, because obviously if a member of staff was to come to the DSL, the head, with that low level concerns, but actually it was false, then you've got mechanisms in place to make sure that actually it's dealt with appropriately. Thanks, Hayden. So what do you as schools and colleges need to do? So again, it's those clear processes in place for sharing and responding to concerns, you know, and like we said at the beginning, no matter how small, I think that's really important. I think it's getting that message across to your staff. If they have a little niggle about another member of staff, however small it might be, I think it's about sharing that, and obviously that can then sort of be that jigsaw piece. A concern can still be significant even if it does not meet the harm threshold. Okay, so obviously there is that sort of fine line between those low level concerns, but then actually if there are a few of those low level concerns, that can amount to actually it does meet the harm threshold for LADO. Schools should ensure adults understand what constitutes appropriate and inappropriate behaviour. So again, it's looking at your staff code of conduct in your setting. What is a low level concern, the importance of sharing those low level concerns, how staff would report those at your school, and the process for recording. So again, if you want to adopt the ENIAS template, then that would be shared with staff so they would know what to do. And then it's obviously that reviewing and responding to concerns after that. Thank you. Examples of low level concerns. So these are just scenarios of things that could be happening or could have happened in your setting. So it's just to give you an idea of what a low level concern looks like. So for example, a driver of a school bus speeding and going through a red light, so that would be classed as a low level concern and would need reporting. 2 members of staff talking inappropriately about a child in their class and the conversation then being overheard by a colleague. A teacher shouting at students in a lesson. Wellbeing concerns over staff members, a teacher being too friendly with one or more of the students, a member of staff in the school having favourites, adults taking photographs of children on their mobile phone, engaging with a child on a one-to-one basis in a secluded area behind a closed door, and using inappropriate, sexualized, intimidating or offensive language. So obviously this is just a snapshot of some of examples of low-level concerns, but it gives you an idea of what they sort of look like. Thanks, Hayden. Also, part of the low-level concerns process is, staff can self-report as well. So, that could be personal tuition in the holidays. They've purchased something for a child, for example, a book, a birthday cake, or something like that. Seeing students changing and not wearing any clothes, so they, could have walked into the cloakroom or the toilet area or classroom, and obviously they weren't expecting that, and actually they've seen that. So it's about them self-reporting that, so that can be obviously evidenced. Driving a student in their car, for example, home from a sports fixture because nobody was there to pick up. So the self-reports, that can happen as well. I suppose it's staff covering themselves, and actually it's about that transparency, creating that culture where adults feel comfortable and confident to do that. Thanks, Hayden. So obviously, this goes back to sort of at the beginning, really, it's that duty to report concerns about an individual's suitability to work with children. It's about that duty to report, including self-reporting, which we just talked about, any incident in which an adult has or may have behaved in a way that is inconsistent with your staff code of conduct. And that's, inappropriate behaviour inside, outside of work and online, and that's key in that part as well, the online part, because obviously, like we've talked about with sort of previously with Kat and Helen as well, that's something that's really sort of in the forefront at the moment. Failure to report or respond to such concerns would constitute a failure in professional responsibility to safeguard children and promote welfare. Thank you. So last few slides now. So I feel like I've bombarded you with lots of information, but obviously it's here for you to go back to and look at it in your sort of own time and pace. So things that schools and settings should do. So you should have those clear systems in place for all reporting of adults' behaviour causing concern. Clear systems in place for whistleblowing that are promoted to all staff, which a lot of you are doing. I'm seeing the posters around school for LADO, and obviously it's those concerns that do meet that threshold. That's the difference with the whistleblowing compared to low-level concerns. Promoting an open and transparent culture where staff feel valued and are confident to report concerns. Thanks, Hayden. And what staff should do. So again, you can share this with your staff in your settings. Be familiar with their establishment's arrangements for reporting and recording, taking responsibility for recording any incident and passing that information on where they have concerns about any matter pertaining to the welfare of an individual in the school or setting. So this means that education settings should have an effective, confidential system for recording and managing concerns raised by any individual regarding adults' conduct and allegation against staff and volunteers. Thank you. So again, like I said, I've been around lots of schools. These posters are prominent in lots of schools that I visit. It's about, offering that support to staff so they know where to go. It's that whistleblowing. Obviously, LADO is key to all of this as well. The low-level concerns obviously don't miss LADO's threshold, but low-level concerns that are tracked and monitored actually could meet that threshold, because a lot of these small low-level concerns could actually amount to that sort of meeting that threshold for LADO. Thank you. And obviously this is the sort of criteria below. These are posters as well that I sort of send to schools to put around their settings as well, so that the criteria is really sort of obvious and identifiable for schools and their settings. Thanks, Hayden. Okay, and then this is just my last slide here, and it's this important message that I hope I've got across this morning. The fact that all staff should be aware of their establishments, their setting safeguarding procedures, including the procedures for dealing with these allegations against staff, whether it's agency staff, volunteers, staff employed by the school, for reporting these low-level concerns. And I think the staff training is key, so they actually know what these look like and what they would do if that happened in their setting. All right, thank you for listening. And like I said, if you've got any sort of questions, if you pop them in the chat and I will respond to you. But yeah, I'll upload that document as well. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, there is a question about the low level form.
Okay, yeah, I can add that to the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I'm very conscious about the fact that we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to hand over straight away to Julie to do her presentation. Julie, over to you.
Thanks, Hayden. Hi, everyone. If you haven't met me already, I'm Julie Bunn. I sit in social care, but I am the virtual school head teacher, and we're responsible for looked after children, for a new project with children in need and child protection, strategic work with those children, and also advice and information for any child who is adopted or special guardianship or child arrangement order. So I'm here today to talk about attendance. But really, attendance is not the issue. We'll talk about that as we move on. Because I've not got as much time as I thought, can you please put in the chat if you are aware of the new duties around attendance, and if you feel you fully understand what the local authority is being asked to do around attendance. If you haven't been to Sarah Fawcett's webinar, or if you haven't heard about the new guidance, can you put that in the chat? So basically, I don't want to say things that you've already heard. So can you put in the chat if you know and understand the attendance guidance that's we're starting from September, and then I'll have a little look further. All right, okay. If you can all put, and then as I go along, I'll kind of feel my way, as it were. So the first, next slide, please, Hayden. The first thing I've popped in today is something that's just gone out in the red bag. So the Department for Education, obviously, we are all worried about attendance across the whole country. I've been working with the Children's Commissioner and the Department for Education on this, because last year I was the National Chair of Virtual School Heads. Yeah, right, I think I will go through it then, everyone. So it's particularly important because of the increase in pupil absence after the pandemic. So if you have a little look in the red bag, the DfE have recently announced the expansion of new sector-led school attendance hubs, and we're really encouraging schools across North Yorkshire, and particularly those in Scarborough. There's that lovely Scarbados beach behind me. So anyone in Scarborough, as part of the priority education investment area, consider signing up to receive free support from these hubs, but not just Scarborough. So the new attendance hubs will be led by senior leaders in schools with effective attendance practice in some of the largest trusts in the country. And as part of the programme, these schools will share their strategies. So there's information on that there for you. We're going to quickly talk about the national picture. Next slide, please. Thanks, Hayden. And then we'll go through some of North Yorkshire's education data and themes, because the main thing that I'll be saying here is, as it were, attendance. We need to think systemically, don't we, that other things come into play. And then we've got some reflections from our Children and Families Education community of practice. Next slide, please, Hayden. So attendance is the issue, but what is the question? I'd like you to put in the chat that if a child has poor attendance, what questions might you ask? I want you to start thinking systemically, because it's never one thing around attendance, is it? And we want curiosity as well. Next slide, please. So let me think. Let me see some questions. If a child's got poor attendance, what questions would you want to ask? I love that first one. Perfect. Keep going. Yeah, like that. Why? Good. Lovely. Keep them coming and share. Keep them coming. So, guys, we know that the white paper was scrapped, but quite a few things have remained and are moving through different legislation. So we know that we are all working on the new attendance duties. That LAs now, the wording is LAs must give regard to the new duties but we all know that if something's come out as firmly as the guidance, that when we're all Ofsteded, we'll be expected to do it. And we've also got WAND nationally. Again, is everybody aware of WAND? WAND is the National Attendance Collection. Over the whole country, 80% of schools are now signing up to WAND. At the moment, WAND will give us attendance of all children. Oh, I love those questions. I'll be using them. I'll be using them in further training. WAND is collecting attendance of looked after children and children with an EHCP, as well as all children. We're working really hard with the DFE, and we're hoping that very, very soon we'll have SIN, child in need and child protection markers as well on WAND. At the moment, there's two systems. So please, if your school can sign up to our local system, the group call through XFault, please sign up to that as well, because it's really hard. One of the main duties of an LA is to be that safety net for vulnerable children. And it's really hard if we don't get all the data. So it's a personal plea from me to get in touch with our new attendance worker through Sarah Fawcett if you're having any issues with that system. We've also had the publication of the consultation on stable homes built on love. We're not going to have time today, I think, to talk about that much further, but I will see if we all feel that maybe moves on to the next agenda, or we might do a webinar on that, because I really want to hear from designated safeguarding leads about what you feel. And if you are, please have a look at the consultation. I'm replying as National Association of Virtual School Heads to that stable homes built on love. And really, it's that whole rethink, much more emphasis on early help, much more emphasis on finding strength in the family network, much more emphasis on working with fathers, you know, getting more children to live with their relatives, with their network, with connected people. That's basically what stable homes built on love is all about. And we know that's important, because if a child comes into foster care or residential, you can basically know from the evidence that their life will be cut short by 10 to 20 years. And that is, you know, it's science. We know that, adverse childhood experiences. There's also working together, rewrite. I'm on the rewrite group. And again, what I'm trying to do for everybody is to make sure that it's not just social care language in working together, and that teachers and early years staff and colleges, everybody can see themselves in that document. Obviously, we've had the SEN review, and again, much more around local provision, children not having to travel a long way for that SEN provision, and provision being local and being in school if at all possible, and much more emphasis on quality alternative provision. A quick update from the National Association of Virtual School Heads. We have our funding announced for another 2 years funding for the children in need and child protection work. So we have every Tuesday afternoon. You've all had this information, but I think Amy, our assistant head, is in the room today, and we'll put the link in the chat of how to join our Tuesday afternoon drop-ins. So if you're worried about a child who is actually any worries, if adoption or child in need or child protection, please just drop in on a Tuesday afternoon. But you can contact Virtual School by any method at any time, but that is the time when we are here to discuss those cases and to really talk about attendance, particularly at those meetings. Next slide, please. So yeah, we're really pleased about that funding, and we also have pupil premium for post-16 as well. So here we are, attendance. So you can see here that during the 22-23 academic year, our attendance rates for primary, secondary and special. So for primary, we're above national. For secondary, we're above national. And in special, we're above national. And you can see the persistent absence rates underneath. But actually, when you dig a little deeper, and throughout these slides, I'd like you to focus on the fact that North Yorkshire, we do very well for all pupils, but we don't do as well for vulnerable learners. And that's my message to you, that actually we're here today to think about those vulnerable learners, to think about those children on the edge of care, to think about any child who is open to early help or has a social worker, and what can we all do? Because you know, it's everybody working together to think about attendance for children involved in social care. Thanks, Hayden. And I'm just going to go through some quite quickly. So you can see here the suspensions and exclusions. So I'm talking about attendance, but quite often poor attendance can be mixed in and following periods of suspension or exclusion. So I don't think we can talk about attendance without talking about suspensions, without talking about exclusions, without talking about part-time timetables, without talking about unmet special educational needs. So again, attendance is one word, but it's a myriad. That we need to think systemically. Can you just flick through, because I know we've only got 5 minutes left now, Hayden. We're going to flick through these slides. You can have a look at them at your leisure, but what I think is good for everyone who's a designated safeguarding lead is for you to look at the horizon of North Yorkshire, not just, you know, your school. So some of you might not have known how many children are at the PRU, or how many children are getting support from the Medical Education Service, really important. How many children are electively home educated, very worrying numbers, I think. So some really useful data. If you'd like to go back to this, because I'm quite a regular at these meetings, just pop it in the chat and we'll actually, you know, do another session on this later. Can we have some on Gypsy Roma? Is that Gypsy Roma traveller attendance? Just to check. Yeah, thank you. We can certainly do that, and we've got some members of the early help team as well who are doing a lot of work in that area. Okay, so next slide, please, Hayden. We're just going to rush through these because you can look at all of this later. So you can see that we have special educational needs gaps, basically, that our SEND pupils in some areas, you know, we do have that gap. Can you move on now, Hayden, and we'll come back to this if people want to. And again, sorry, I'm whizzing through now, guys, because we haven't got much time. Yeah, and again, I didn't realise how much data I've put in this. Okay, so the new, right, so we'll do this longer session. Yeah, we can, don't worry, because I'm regularly here, so Hayden knows he can get me in again. And it's been a brilliant morning. I wouldn't have wanted to miss any of that. I've just become a granny, and my goodness, everything from Helen's talk has really hit home with me. So new guidance on attendance. So the new guidance is with us for working together to improve school attendance. And the guidance is for everyone, schools, trusts, governing bodies and local authorities, because we all need to work together. I was with Isabel Trowler yesterday talking about how social workers, how anyone involved in children's social care can work better with schools around school attendance. And as I say, very, very interested in pulling any more information about what's working around the country and bringing it back to North Yorkshire. So been visiting quite a few local authorities who have attendance panels. One really good board in Suffolk that I'm going to do some more work on, which is the Safer in Schools board. So I'm talking really about school as a place of safety, not just attendance. What are our roles and responsibilities? What support should we be providing to families for persistently and severely absent or at the risk of so? When to use legal interventions, and provide details of what schools are expected to do. Next slide, please. So that's all in the guidance. So more today we're going to talk about what the local authority is expected to do, and I'm part of the attendance working group, and Sarah Fawcett has been seconded to develop the work in this area, which is developing at speed. So we need to be able to offer opportunities for all schools to share effective practice, We need to provide each school with a named point of contact in an attendance support team. We need to hold termly conversations with each school to identify, discuss and signpost access to services. We need to have a school attendance support team to work with all schools. Where there are out-of-school barriers, provide each identified pupil and their family with access to services that they need in the first instance. Good question. Sarah's done an amazing amount of work on this, and she has come up with a couple of alternatives that are actually going to our senior leaders next week for a decision. So we will be able to come out with you very soon, everyone, on how that school attendance team work is progressing, but it's basically with our decision makers at CYPLT. If the issue persists, voluntary early help assessment where appropriate, and take an active part in multi-agency efforts with the school and other partners. Next slide, please, Hayden. Provide a lead practitioner. So lots of work's been going on around virtual school, around social workers, around which members in early help, around who might be that lead practitioner if you have a SEN issue. So again, all of that is in the planning stage, and those decisions will be made very, very soon, and we'll get back to you when Sarah's had the agreement. So provide lead practitioners, and where there are safeguarding concerns, ensure there's joint working between school, children's social care and statutory safeguarding partners. Support pupils with medical conditions, SEN with poor attendance, working closely together, and ensure suitable education such as alternative provision is arranged for children of compulsory school age because of health reasons. Okay, next slide please, Hayden. Regularly monitor the attendance of children with a social worker, put in place post education plans. We already have those, very high quality and very timely. Secure regular attendance of looked after children. Our attendance actually in North Yorkshire for looked after children is above national. So we're pleased about that, but we still have children with poor attendance. We still have children we're really worried about. We still have children on part-time timetables. Work jointly with the school to provide formal support options, including parenting contracts and education supervision orders, and where support's not working, being engaged with appropriate attendance enforcement through legal intervention. So the local authority has to have a strategic approach to improving attendance for the whole area and make it a key focus for all frontline council services. And we need to track local attendance data to provide support and unblock area-wide attendance barriers where they impact numerous schools. Next slide, please, Hayden. Okay, I think we're out of time, so we will come back to stable homes built on love. You'll get the rest of my presentation, but I just don't think we've got time today. But you've had an overall initial look at what the local authority is working on, and we'll be back to you really quick, really soon with our plans for that attendance team. I was going to talk about, so I'll just mention it really briefly, that we've developed a community of practice in children and families. So it's all those parts of children's and families who work with education. So I will be asking for some consultation from our designated safeguarding leads on what you feel's working well and what you're worried about. But as I say, we don't want to keep you any longer, so Hayden and I will discuss how we're going to follow on, but you've got some useful links there. Thanks, Hayden.
Thank you very much, Julie, and apologies that we've run out of time, everyone. But as Julie said, we will get something out to you as soon as possible. Maybe if we could actually record it as a vodcast and send it out to everybody so that they'd be able to get that presentation still, might be a way around that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, good idea, Hayden.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'll schedule that in for us. Okay, so just wanted to thank everybody for their attendance today and all of our presenters as well. It's been a really good session. I hope that you've all got a lot out of that. Don't forget the links for the partnership are on the website as well. So please go and visit those, and we will see you next time. Thank you.